from the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast.
The ag industry preparing for another big report from USDA, plus price problems for dairy farmers. In agribusiness, interest rates.
You know, we could still see one more rate, but we're not seeing the inflation that the targets.
And some spirited debate about what can be considered wine.
AgDay, presented by the Chevy Silverado. High-strength steel for high-strength dependability.
Good morning, I'm Clinton Griffiths. Later today, USDA will roll out fresh crop production estimates, and the trade says these October numbers could set market direction for the rest of the year. The latest WANSI report updating yield forecasts from USDA along with world supply and demand numbers. Markets not getting excited ahead of that report, with Wednesday seeing mixed trade at the CME in Chicago. That even as the latest crop progress numbers put harvest at a snail's pace at just 22% complete for corn. Now on the soybean side, harvest isn't going much faster, with rains slowing progress over the past week. Traders say yields will be the key number.
The big ticket item here is the yield number. A lot of traders believe that USDA might go slightly higher with their yield number this month after increasing it in both August and September. So we're looking for a number right around 50 bushels per acre nationally. You know, a lot of the early yields have been a little bit better than expected, but we've really just seen the tip of the iceberg so far. There's been a lot of delays in terms of harvest, a lot of wet weather, so a lot remains to be seen. But the USDA report again Thursday morning.
Peanut growers also looking for fresh production forecast even as harvest rolls across the South. The September predictions had 2017 production on pace to eclipse prior records, including 2012 3.3 million tons. The industry even wondering if there's going to be enough certified warehouse space this year. The national orange crop also expected to see fresh production forecasts in the WASDE report today. Meanwhile, Florida Governor Rick Scott and Ag Commissioner Adam Putnam are in Washington this week to meet with state lawmakers. They're hoping to push for a disaster relief package to help Sunshine State farmers recover from Hurricane Irma. New numbers put total ag losses from Hurricane Irma at an estimated $2.5 billion. Meanwhile, the president says he'll stand with the people of California as they battle intense fires. Charred buildings, vineyards, and homes being found in California's Napa and Sonoma valleys. There are more than 100,000 acres of wine grapes planted in those two counties alone, which are home to more than 650 wineries. Multiple people have died and at least 2,000 structures have been destroyed in Northern California. Investigators are looking into the causes, but as of airtime, no determination has been made at any of the 17 sites in the state. Back in Washington, day one of round 4 NAFTA negotiations now in the books, while the president once again throwing out big threats to nix the trade deal. But it was all smiles and handshakes as President Trump welcomed Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau to the White House on Tuesday. The president calling Trudeau a great friend of mine. But now as far as NAFTA goes, the president showing no signs of retreat. In a recent Forbes magazine interview, he says that NAFTA should be scrapped in order to make it better, saying, quote, "I happen to think that NAFTA will have to be terminated if we're going to make it good," end quote. So what happens if the U.S. can't strike a NAFTA 2.0 deal? Jim Wiesmeyer says that's a question no one wants to answer.
Well, every time I ask a White House official or a trade official that from the U.S., they go, "That's conjecture. Let's handle that when it happens." But you should always have a fallback plan. The market needs to know that, but they will not answer that. Is it to just continue the current NAFTA, by the way, the one that Trump says is the worst trade agreement ever? But if you don't have any NAFTA, you're going to see a ugly day for the ag markets in the U.S. because that obliterates the integrated North American market.
Meanwhile, the ag industry is calling for calm following a weekend meeting in Canada. House Ag Chairman Mike Conaway says NAFTA is, quote, too important to screw up. Conaway says the goal of the meeting was to ensure Canada understands that U.S. ag has a keen interest in getting NAFTA done and done right. Meanwhile, dairy access expected to be part of discussions, although trade experts say a deal could also include allowing more dairy products from Canada and Mexico into the U.S. USDA's last milk production report showing August production at 17 billion pounds. That's up 2% from last year. With a major increase in product, how do prices look moving forward? Well, Betsy Gibbon, she looked for those answers at last week's World Dairy Expo.
Keith York is one of the thousands of dairymen who attends World Dairy Expo. like the others, he keeps watch on milk prices.
Right now, we're right at the cost of production.
We're kind of in this period of the doldrums. We're not seeing a lot of price movement, and the futures markets indicate that as well. So we can be looking at, this type of price situation environment for the next 3 to 6 to 9 months, depending on what happens, with the government, Farm Bill, NAFTA.
Despite the uncertainty of what's ahead policy-wise, Brian Doherty with Stuart Peterson says it's going to be challenging to see much of a rally in 2018. A push in prices will have to come from increased demand.
From a producer's perspective, rallies into that $17 area, 18, that's probably all we're going to come by. We're hopeful that demand can push it there, but when it does get there, it takes some defensive posturing.
Mike North with Commodity Risk Management Group believes milk prices could potentially move higher short term. That's thanks to holiday demand for cheese.
If there's any hope for a little bit of an uptick in price, generally now is that time. So if buyers come forward, if we see some continuation of this recent uptick in cheese value, if we can break through especially the 180 level in cheese, that gives some optimism for the fall on milk price. However, I would provide some caution to that as we went beyond October, November.
Analysts say cheese may be carrying price. It's strengthened more than Class 3, despite USDA's last cold storage report showing there's a record amount of total natural cheese inventory.
You've got this good demand for cheese, but you don't have enough undercurrent demand in the other products to push prices much higher. So from a producer's perspective, I don't want to sound like Debbie Downer here, but I don't see a lot of variables right now that are aligning that would suggest a real, push higher in prices until we start to see production curve in, demand increase above where it is, or both.
North believes because of that seasonal demand, cheese prices have the potential to tick higher.
There's still some potential for cheese prices to go up a little bit further. It really now will be a question of how hearty of an appetite the buyers have as we head towards fall, how big of an export uptick we can see based on some of these really friendly dynamics there.
Others worry buyers are done purchasing cheese for the holidays.
And we had hoped to get a price bump, from that holiday buying. Well, that's all done with already. So there just isn't a lot of enthusiasm for increased purchases going forward through the end of the year, unfortunately.
Even though there are hurdles, producers like York remain optimistic the future is bright.
I think the dairy industry and I think that demand is going to increase, and we're going to have a not so much in our country, but in the world market, we'll always have the demand for the products.
Reporting for AgDay, I'm Betsy Gibbon.
All right, thanks, Betsy. Now, North says whey prices are relatively soft, adding that if the U.S. can't market whey, it could drag the milk price down further. Ag Secretary Sonny Perdue welcomed 2 leaders to his staff at the Department of Ag Tuesday. Perdue swore in Steve Senske as Deputy Secretary of Agriculture and Ted McKinney as USDA's new Undersecretary of Agriculture for Trade and Foreign Ag Affairs. Cindy Clausen's in for Mike Hoffman this week, and she joins us with today's crop comments.
Good morning, Clinton. We'll start with cotton in Alabama. A crop reporter in Houston County says the jury is still out on how much damage was done to cotton by Hurricane Nate. Prior to the storm, 60% was rated good to excellent. About a quarter of the crop has been picked in Alabama. In North Dakota, sunflower harvest is a bit behind. As of Tuesday, 4% is harvested. The 5-year average is 12%. The crop appears to have struggled from drought. 37% is good to excellent. A similar amount is called fair. Coming up in just a few minutes, we'll take a look at your national forecast and maybe some harvest weather for the nation's midsection. But for now, here are some hometown temps.
Save time each day and receive the latest market prices directly to your cell phone with market updates. It makes it effortless to stay aware of shifting market prices. Just text Markets 8 to 31313 to get started.
All right, when we come back, we'll discuss interest rates and how it's expected to impact borrowers. And some bubbly from Spain raises new questions about what can be considered wine. Hear the debate later on AgDay.
Unlock the power of ag technology this December in Indianapolis at the first ever Ag Tech Expo. Learn all about it at farmjournalagtech.com.
And In analysis this morning, Tyne Morgan joins us from the road with a look at the cost of borrowing money and interest rate expectations.
Here now with Chris Nararian. When we look at interest rates, Chris, we continue to see, a couple months ago we thought, oh, maybe we won't see another interest rate hike, and then we had a recent Fed meeting where it sounded like they were pretty confident that we would see an interest rate hike yet this year. Kind of what's your thoughts at this point?
Well, the Fed really hasn't changed their thing. I mean, they keep saying that it's coming and there's room for, one, well, it used to be two, now obviously just room for one already in October. So, we could still see one more rate, but we're not seeing the inflation that targets. Now, obviously they can change their targets. They might look at other metrics. And so the market trades around that, and that's why you're seeing a little pressure on the U.S. dollar in anticipation of that. But we really won't know until the December meeting.
It's inevitable that we will see another interest rate hike at some time. Sure. You're just saying it may not be this year.
Right. I mean, they have a shot to do one this year, and they certainly have room to do, I would say, at least 2 or 3 next year. But it really depends on how much longer they wait.
But looking at the macro picture, what tells you that it's a possibility that they would raise interest rates? I mean, what signals are we seeing that the economy is doing pretty well?
Personally, I don't see the signals. I mean, we're certainly seeing improvement in revenue, top line growth. Unemployment's really low, but we're not seeing the inflation indicators, at least the ones that they have, said that they've looked at in the past. We're just not there yet. Now, obviously, they could also act if they're scared that it might overheat very quickly and they have, they can't, keep it under control, and so they might do a preemptive hike. But even that's, low likely event.
Chris, when we look at Hurricane Irma, Hurricane Harvey, I mean, we look at some of these hurricanes that came through that really did a number on the economies and those local economies there. Will that have any impact at all when you look overall?
In the macro picture, probably not, sadly saying. Obviously, there's a lot of people that we're praying for them that, they can recover as quickly as possible. But when you see localized events like that, you certainly see the local market stepping in and people helping each other out, buying more materials and to help rebuild. But it doesn't change the scope of the entire, U.S. economy or even the global economy.
But do you think that the Fed needs to release some of their balance sheet? I mean, they've got a big.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, they've got, trillions of dollars that they need to release, and they're mindful that if they do it too quickly, they're going to overheat the economy, and it's just, and all of a sudden we're back to where we were 10 years ago.
And that's one thing they said they don't want to do is overheat the economy. All right, Chris, thanks so much. We appreciate it. Stay with us. We'll have much more Ag Day when we come back.
GA Capital provides M&A, capital raising, and general corporate finance advisory services to companies in and around agribusiness. To speak with GA Capital, call Chris at 901-472-1353. Ag Day, brought to you by Liberty Herbicide, the simply better solution for superior weed control and a stronger yield. Ag Day weather, brought to you by Kawasaki and the new Mule Pro FXR side-by-side. Ride like a boss with high-end styling and rugged capability.
Welcome back to Ag Day. Here with Cindy Clausen. Cindy, as we look at the map, it has been wet in parts that are trying to harvest, but you think it could dry out a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, at least over the next couple of days, we're going to have at least some drier conditions. Whether it's dry enough to dry things out, enough to get into the fields, that's another question. But we are going to see the sun finally starting to return into parts of the Corn Belt. You got high pressure there in the nation's midsection, and that is going to help. The two main areas to watch, though, are going to be here in the eastern United States. We've got this low pressure system, so we'll see a little bit of rain with that, mainly in the mid-Atlantic states, but also in the far northwest. We've got several days of kind of that rain and high elevation snow. We don't see a lot happening in the nation's midsection. We've got the clouds, maybe some fog to start the day, but we're going to slowly see that being scoured out by that high pressure as everything moves off to the east. Now, yeah, we have a front going through the northern plains, not a ton of moisture with it, at least in the early going. It'll eventually pick up some moisture as we head into the weekend, and that gets a little bit further to the east. But for now, it looks like a lot of areas in the Corn Belt will have maybe a couple of days at least of dry weather to really get some work done. As we head in through the day on Friday, we'll start to see that front getting into the Great Lakes, and that's when we start to pick up a little bit of moisture. And as we get into, again, the mid-Atlantic, you're still looking at some rain there and some high elevation snow with some rain in the lower elevations in the northwest. Here's a look at the precipitation estimate. The past 24 hours has really been with that low in the northeast and mid-Atlantic states. As we look at the next 24 hours, really the big area to watch is only a little bit in the southeast, but that rain and upper elevation snow in the northwest. Taking a look at the snowfall, that's really what we're going to be seeing. It's still just really kind of confined to that northwestern part of the country, but some of those higher elevations could be seeing over 4, maybe even up to 8 inches of snow. Here's a look at your temperatures. Most areas in the 50s and 60s across the northern tier states, 70s and 80s down in the southern half of the United States. Heading into these overnight hours, we're going to see some pretty chilly temperatures as you get into the northwest, down to the freezing mark around in Bismarck, but we're seeing a lot of 50s, 60s, even some 70s in the eastern part of the country. It warms up a little bit as you get into the central and eastern Corn Belt, back into some 70s as we head into tomorrow. Let's take a look at the jet stream. Still a trough in the western United States, a ridge in the east. We're going to see that trough translate eastward, kind of flattening out just a little bit as it gets towards the northeast, but that's going to drag some rain across the eastern part of the country this weekend. That's a look at your national forecast. Now let's check on the weather where you live. Mariposa, California, sunny and a bit cooler for you today with a high of 70 degrees. Bonita, Louisiana, sunny and warmer with a high of 83. And Cambridge, Virginia, cooler with some light rain and drizzle possible.
All right, next in Drovers, we look at beef packer capacity. Plus, do you have a favorite color of wine? Later, we'll talk about a new hue, but some people wonder if it can even be called wine.
Instinct and N-Serve nitrogen stabilizers don't just stabilize nitrogen, they maximize it, so corn crops give them max in return. Learn more at maxinmaxout.com. Drovers TV on Ag Day is brought to you by QLF. For 40 years, QLF has been proud to support American farmers that feed the world.
And news from our partners at Drovers. After a string of 46 straight weeks of profitability, cattle feeders dipped back into the red. Feedlots lost an average of $13 per head last week. The string started in November of last year. Now, according to the Sterling Beef Profit Tracker, last week's 5 area choice steers saw a modest gain of $1.25 per hundred, but costs against those steers marketed last week increased $57 per head. In other news from Drovers, America's beef packing industry currently can slaughter and process about 29 million fed cattle and 6.5 million cows annually. According to Sterling Marketing, that means packers will utilize 88.5% of fed capacity this year. Now, based on projections for 2018 beef slaughter, Sterling's projecting fed cattle utilization will increase to 90%.
Beef packer slaughter capacity and utilization is an important barometer cattle market analysts monitor when building their market forecasts and outlooks. It is important to recognize that packers do not adjust their harvest capacity to accommodate livestock numbers, but rather they adjust their capacity based on consumer demand.
Henderson says packers are utilizing 90% of cow capacity this year and is forecast to climb to 94% next year. That's good news for producers as it shows beef demand is strengthening. Well, still to come, it's made from grapes and is an alcoholic beverage, but it's not wine. What is it? Details when we come back.
In the country. Brought to you by Kubota's M7 series. Learn more about the largest tractor in Kubota history at Kubota.com.
What's your favorite wine, red or white? Well, what about blue? A Spanish company is setting its sights on the U.S. market with a controversial alcohol product that is making traditional winemakers blue. It looks like wine, it smells like wine, it may even taste like a light wine, but purists say it cannot be called wine. The beverage, made from red and white grapes sourced from several vineyards in Spain, the drink has an alcohol content of 11.5%, but because of its unusual color, government regulators in Spain and the EU banned the drink from being called wine.
And about the color, which is what you are possibly wondering, what we do is we mix different kinds of grapes, and then we extract the pigment from the skin of the red grape. That's called anthocyanin. And that's where the blue comes from. So it's actually 100% grape.
I've never seen blue wine before, and I really like my wine. So that was, it was fun. It was something I wanted to try for sure. The taste was very smooth. You couldn't really tell that there was alcohol in it, which was a little weird, but I feel like once you've had a couple drinks, you'll notice it.
McCarthy says it's not for wine connoisseurs because no blue wine category exists under these 17 wine products listed under European Union law. The drink is listed as other alcoholic drinks. And Spanish national law for wine defines the 3 kinds of wines as red, white, and rosé. There you have it. Cheers to innovation. That's all the time we have this morning. We're sure glad you tuned in. Start your day with us. From all of us here at AgDay, I'm Clinton Griffiths. Have a great day.
AgDay, brought to you by Ram Commercial, America's longest-lasting heavy-duty pickups.